Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of That Early Childhood Nerd. I'm Heather Burnt Santee. Really excited. My guest today is Amanda Morgan. Hi, Amanda.
Hi, thanks for having me, Heather.
Yeah, would you tell folks a little bit about yourself, whatever you want them to know? We're going to talk about your book, Not Just Cute. Oh, it won't work with my green screen. There we go. Not Just Cute, how powerful play drives development in early childhood, but you do a lot of things.
Yeah, I juggle a lot of spin a lot of plates, I guess. So my background's in elementary and early childhood education, and then I did my master's degree in human development, focusing on child development. And so the phrase "not just cute" that has come to name like everything that I do really comes from that experience. A friend and I shared this closet of an office at the university. And we were graduate student teaching assistants, and we part of our job was to work in the child development lab and to make sure the children had a good experience, the parents have a good experience, but it was also to work with student teachers coming through the program. And so we would individually in our separate classrooms, we each worked with a set of teachers, and my job was to meet with these teachers and talk to them about their lesson plans and what they wanted to do in the classroom. And over again, I and my friend as well would hear teachers sit down and say, "Well, here's what I have planned, and it's going to be so cute."
Yeah.
Right? Or I
Yes.
found this book and it's the cutest. Everything
Hmm.
was really cute. And while cute in and of itself is fine,
Yeah,
it's also not a developmental objective.
right.
And so I found that part of my job was helping them to understand that cute's fine, but it can't just be cute.
Right.
You need to understand how that drives development. And so that's where it started. That's kind of where the seeds began. And so I have a website and a podcast. They're both called Not Just Cute, and just kind of focused on helping educators understand that piece, but it's
Mhm.
also helping educators articulate to others. So parents, administrators, policymakers, just trying to get everybody on the same page
Mhm.
about why this work of early childhood is not and should not just be cute or
Right.
entertaining, but really needs to be bound by these important principles and research that tell us about how young children learn and grow.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's a lot of the work that I do. And then this book came about with the same name to drive that point and to make it just easily shareable with other people. So I
Yeah.
do a lot of speaking and training, and a lot of times I would hear people say, I love what you said. I believe it. I just wish that my administrator had been here, or I wish that I could articulate it to other people the way that you just did. And so I wanted a book that was easy to read, easy to pass along, and full of all the footnotes and the
Mhm.
research to really drive the point home to get
Yeah.
all of us on the same page with
Yeah,
this
I
important
when
message.
I read it, it's been a few weeks since I finished it, a couple weeks since I finished it. I posted on my nerd page pretty immediately that I was enjoying it, and that's exactly what I said. It's well written, it's intellectual, but it's accessible, and you back it up. Like everything that they would say, "Oh, that's just Amanda." You're like, "Nope, this is not just
Right.
me. Here's the research that backs this up."
Yes. I read your comment when you posted it, and it just made me smile so big because I was like, that's exactly what I was trying to do. I was trying to make an easy conversational
Yeah.
read, but packed
Yeah.
with not just some studies say, but this study right here. This
Yeah.
is where it says it.
Yeah, that's great. It's funny because I promise I'm going to get to the book and start the show, but about 10 years ago, I was on, before I had any of my own stuff, before I was out there at all, I was a guest on um, the Child Care Bar and Grill with Jeff Johnson and Lisa Murphy. And I said something like, we have to get beyond the cute. We can't just be
Mhm.
planning on cute. And so for just a little bit, that was like, a thing I was really thinking about, that getting beyond the cute. And then I found all your stuff and I was like, oh, Amanda's got this going. She's already got it going. Okay, well, so I have a quote to start the conversation just because that's what I always do. But as I showed you before, I've got all these little tabbies that
I
we
love
can
it.
go to if we need to.
Makes my nerd heart happy.
So you wrote, this is kind of later in the book, but you wrote, the best programs don't just allow play, they prioritize it as a foundation for learning. Play creates the perfect context for children to build and learn within relationships and interactions. It's how we're wired as humans rather than computers. Play is not just cute, it's how children grow, connect, and thrive. It's how they become fully human. And as educators, caregivers, and parents, we have the privilege of fostering that. Now that was such a powerful kind of synopsis of the whole idea, right?
Yeah.
So, um, uh, would you talk just a little bit about the difference between allowing play and prioritizing play? And then we'll see where we go.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think play is having a movement, and I think there are more people that are understanding that play actually is valuable. It's important to us as humans.
Yeah.
That we may even have parents who want to know that their child has opportunities to play
Mhm.
at school or in their day. But there's a difference between just saying, "Oh yeah, play is important. Let's make sure we have a break in the
Yeah.
day, right? Let's make sure that we stop the learning and make sure they get time for play." Or, make sure that we don't cut out recess, which is sadly
Mhm.
happening in some places.
Yes.
So there's a difference between just making sure we have time to play versus recognizing that play is this amazing medium that drives development and how we can support and scaffold that throughout the day, not just as a break from the day. There's
Right.
a difference there when we prioritize it and support it and really see it for all of the just amazing power that it has.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've been thinking a lot about how people will say we need to get them outside so they get their energy out or so they can blow off
Right.
some of this energy. And if that's what it takes to get kids outside, fine, but it's so much more than that. Like it's not
Mhm.
just I've got to let them I've got to let them play a little bit so I can get them back to my goals and my
Right.
plan. And that's a hard shift, I think,
Hmm.
for some people. And I don't want to make it sound like if you've ever said, I want to let them blow off their energy, that you're
Right.
horrible. But we do have to kind of dig a little deeper sometimes and say, this
Yeah,
is what they deserve. And this is how this is what development tells us is really important. So we're going to
absolutely.
make time for it.
Yeah. And like you said, it's not that it's terrible if they go do recognize they have a need for energy, right? That because that's
Mhm.
true. They do
Yes.
need to move. They need to be outside. They need to do all these things. But like you said, it's just a few levels deeper when we
Yeah.
understand it's not a and then we do this, but it's wrapped into everything that we're about.
Yeah. So, I know I didn't give you any prep. And I've had enough. I mean, I didn't give you specific topics, and I've had enough authors on the show to know that we don't. And now that I've written a book, I double know that it's
Right.
true. We don't always remember exactly what we put in there, but you do a really good job of defining or kind of clarifying terms because a lot of
Hmm.
us talk about play in different ways, right?
The
We think
challenge.
we're all talking about the same thing, but um, I might be talking about complete freedom for an hour and a
Hmm.
half every morning to be in, to be in the space and make your choices. Someone else might talk about play and mean, well, we use toys instead of worksheets.
Right.
So there's really a range. Can you talk a little bit about how we use the word differently and
Absolutely.
why
That
it's
was one
important
of
to
the
clarify?
Yeah, that's one of the challenges. Like you said, we all talk about play differently and we use interchangeable terms. And I don't necessarily think that I'm definitely not the foremost expert on what all the right terms are. But for me, I had to
Yeah.
establish what do I understand these words to mean and how can we kind of set those out and have these conversations. And so the first place where I worked on a definition, I pulled a few from, these leading experts and their bigger definitions. And I've always felt like part of my job is to take really big, deeper academic type of ideas but try to make them smaller, easier to understand. And so when I read several of these big definitions, I boiled it down to joy and agency is the first thing that I use to define play. And so when we're looking at children playing, we should be looking for joy and agency. And if I'm looking at my classroom and trying to determine if I'm really using play, I want to look for joy and agency. And so the joy element is going to look different. Children are going to find joy in different places. So that speaks to the different types of play we need to have. And I also remind people that joy sometimes looks like smiling and laughing, but sometimes it looks like a really focused,
Right.
even frustrating work at the
Yeah.
block table or somewhere else, right? That sometimes we can be frustrated in having joy because we like the challenge,
Yeah.
right? And then the agency piece is that they get to choose and control and be an active participant. And so we may think we're doing something really playful, but then realize we really haven't given them any room for self expression or choice or differentiation. Then I can step back and say, how could I change this? Where could I insert more agency
Mhm.
and maybe back myself up out of the
Yeah.
equation a little bit?
Yeah.
And then the other piece that really was an aha for me was the work by Jennifer Zosh and Kathy Hirsch-Pasek and a whole line of names that come
Yes.
after that, where they talk about the spectrum of play.
Mhm.
And for me, that was this big aha that that kind of solidified something I'd felt uneasy about. And it's what you just described, that sometimes we talk about this really free play. And then other times we have, guided play, which is a really important strategy for educators to understand. And there's playful instruction in our little mini lessons and
Mhm.
small circle time type things. And I was trying to, for myself, try to find like, how do these all look different? How are they all play? How do I make sense of it all? And so when I stumbled on their spectrum of play, it was just kind of like the heavens opened and finally it all made sense.
Yeah.
That it's this full spectrum, and that all along the line, I mean, even within guided play, there's guided play that looks very, very free. It's more on the free end, and there's guided play with a little more structure and guidance. And just the idea, I mean, if we understand that the best practices come from a responsive nature with young children, we observe and we respond and we adapt, then it makes sense that there should be this whole spectrum
Mhm.
that bends and shifts according to those adaptations and
Yeah.
responsiveness.
Yeah, and I think that that part of the book will be very comforting to people who think, well, I have to step completely out and then it's chaos. Or
Right.
what do I do with my own expertise if I'm not at all involved and everything is just the child leading? And I mean, I'll be honest, I sometimes cringe at guided play
Mm.
because so many people use it as still my idea, still my control, but it's maybe a little bit, we use toys instead of worksheets or something like
Right.
that. But reading your definition was really sort of comforting, uh, because I tend to talk a lot about free play, and in fact, in the book that I have coming out later this year, I use free play. But I'm sort of talking about it in the way you're talking about guided play, where
Uh-huh.
it's they do have the agency, but we've set I'll let you talk more about your definition of it, but we've set some kind of non-controlling parameters and been very intentional. And I'm going to stop. Will you talk a little bit about your definition of guided play
You're
here?
good. Yeah, I feel I'm a metaphor person. And
Mhm.
that's how I make connections and make
Yeah.
sense of things. And so for me, I think the image that I like the best, and I share it in the book as well, is this idea of a swing, right? So when
Uh-huh.
children are on a swing and they're experiencing this freedom and exhilaration, they're flying through the air. But when you look at a swing, it's providing structure and it's providing guidance. That's what the chains and the seat provide for a child. And so without that, they're not flying anymore. They're just falling. It's chaos, right? And it's
Mhm.
frightening, and they can't play as deeply as they would like to because there's not enough structure for what they need. And by the same token, if we chain them to the ground, that's not swinging either, right? That if
Yeah.
we wrap them up in the chains, or if the seat's too big, that doesn't work either. And so it's again that responsive piece that
Yeah.
they do need some guidance, they do need some structure, but we have to find where that right balance is so that it still looks and feels and is experienced as something very free and
Mhm.
exhilarating, but still comfortable and safe. And
Yeah.
so some children and some activities may need a little more guidance some days, right? That even the same activity might look different on different days. Maybe initially we're giving a lot of guidance and structure to help them get going, and then we step out of it, and then it becomes much more free.
Mhm.
So I just go back to the words of those same researchers that say that it can and should shift
Mhm.
as we respond to children. And that's, like you said, it was a comfort to you. That was a comfort to me to realize, oh, it shouldn't look exactly the same all
Yeah.
the time because their needs and interests aren't exactly the same all the time either.
Mhm. Yeah, that responsive piece is so important. And the agency, I think, is where, like, if I had to put my foot down and say this is or this isn't, it would be around responsiveness and agency.
Mhm.
Because when we talk about the research says play is this, and the research says play has this benefit. We really have to know what kind of how those researchers are defining play,
So
right?
true.
Because otherwise we just take the research and make it fit what we already want to do.
Yes.
Sometimes it's validating because we are doing
Right?
things that way, but other times it causes us, or it really should cause us to say, oh, wait, do I need to learn more or watch
Are we
more? Or,
talking about the same thing?
yes, yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. Um, so we jumped kind of just right into, um, the playfulness of it, but why? and you talked about, you wrote this because you want it to be a guide for some and a tool for helping to be more confident in articulating our play philosophy. Why is that an important thing?
Well, I say in the book, people don't value what they don't understand.
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's what I've come to realize is that we talk about defending play, and I totally get that, and I agree, and I don't think anyone should step away from defending play.
Yeah.
But kind of the mindset there of defending is a little bit like we're just going to butt heads about it, right? It's a fight.
Yeah.
And when I can step back and realize that I really believe, and maybe someone would argue, but I believe that people want to do what's best for
Yeah.
children. And I just have to start from that place, even with the knowing the reality that there probably are some bad players out there. But in order to keep moving forward, I have to believe that most people want to do what's best for
Yeah.
children. And so I just want to be the person who helps connect them to good information. We have good people with bad information making bad decisions.
Mhm.
And if we can connect all those good people with good information, then we're going to do better for our children. And so I felt like if we could make that connection, if we could make it easier for them to get good information, but also framed in a way that's not saying you did this, you ruined everything, that I could say, I believe in you and I want to bring you with me to understand how exciting this is that we could be doing better for our children and what wonderful things it will open. I just think that brings people into a conversation in a way that makes them want to be a part of it. And so I
Right.
tried to frame it in that way.
Yeah. And I think keeping the conversation sort of welcoming in that
Mhm.
way. I mean, you said sometimes we just butt heads because we have our philosophies and our beliefs and we don't want to hear another. But I think a lot of what you do in the book, and even, your blog and your podcast is show people what they're already doing that fits, um, so that it's not all or nothing.
Yes.
It's, pieces of this you already know and do and provide. Um, but here's a little nudge.
Right. And I try to do that. I'm glad that you saw that because I really do try to do that for two reasons. One, I feel like, especially with early childhood educators, when I go to do a training, I know that they're not in there saying, you know what? I just don't feel like I have enough to do. And I would like you to tell me 20 more things that I could be doing, right? Or, nobody wants to hear that. Nobody has time for that. And we're asking so much of our early childhood educators that I want to be able to step in and say, here's what you're already doing that's amazing. And I want you to see how amazing it really is. So you can do it more intentionally. You can do it more often. You can do it a little bit more deeply.
Right.
The other reason for that is that I know for you and myself, I'm sure we can look back on our progression as a professional and the
Yes.
things I would look back on myself 20 years ago and think, oh my goodness, I can't believe I thought that, or I can't believe I did that. And so I have to hold that same space for other people to say they are right where they are today and they're doing good things. Can I just help them move a little bit further on their journey to
Mhm.
get a little bit closer to, understanding some of this really important information that I've now found, but I didn't find it on day one of being an early childhood
Right.
professional.
Yeah.
It's the accumulation of things I've learned, for 25, 20 something years,
Mhm.
that I
Yeah.
can give them that, maybe just give them a little head start to learn a little bit more along the way.
Yeah. I just did a webinar about Lillian Katz and
Uh-huh.
her theory about stages of teacher development. And it was really timely to come in and sort of give me a boost of hope that this is a real thing. But in that webinar, I told a story about how I saw some issues in the block area. And so I transformed the block area. And it was so funny because I was in a webinar where I had come prepared to talk about teacher stages, and I'm telling this story, and in the middle of the story, I was like, yeah, but that was after you'd been in it for about 30 years. Like, you can't tell this story and think everyone can just pick up and do it. We're none of us born knowing all of this. And
Oh, I love that.
and so yeah, I just think it's important to go in with that kind of optimism and trust that we all
Mhm.
want to do what we can um, for really healthy child development and
Right.
includes education. Um, but we just need to keep curious and know that we never arrive, I guess, is what I'm gonna
Absolutely. And
say.
even on that note, you having just written a book as well, you'll relate to this. That, that I just keep thinking, how long until I read something in my own book and think, oh, I don't see that way anymore.
That was
Or,
such a fear when I was writing.
right. Or even, and I don't think there will be any huge
Right.
jumps where I, disavow the whole book, but there are even places, even now reading over it, that I'll think, oh, I should have connected that to here, or I
Yeah.
should have brought in this study. And then I have to think, did I even know about that study when I wrote it?
Yep.
If I just read it last week, then I,
Yeah.
right. So it's just, if we're not growing and learning, we're stagnant.
Yeah.
And so if we're, unless we're stagnant, we're going to be changing our minds
Hmm.
or adding to
Yeah.
and constantly learning. And so when we can accept that about ourselves, it makes it a little bit easier for us to hold that space for other people on their own journey and
Yeah.
recognize that, like you said, that it took me 30 years to get to this spot.
Uh-huh.
I'm not going to expect you to be here on day one, but I'm going to share with you what I know and give you that little boost that you need,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
not in a way that's judgmental and says, how do you dare to come in here and not know what I know? Right.
It's so easy.
Right? It's just clear.
I'm gonna use this anecdote to transition into the next topic, but when I was writing mine, it was really around anytime I was writing about neuroscience, I would either
Uh-huh.
be, what if I've completely misunderstood this, or what if in 10 years they debunk it? Going back
Exactly.
and forth. I don't think they're gonna debunk
Right.
what we know,
They'll
but I
just
do.
build, right?
I
They're
would
just
like to
building.
ask you a couple things about your section on play in the brain. Um, uh, because, well, let me just say here's why. Um, because more and more I hear people talking about early educators being brain architects, and this is such a vital time, without digging deeply to see what that really means. Like we have this research now that says birth to 3, birth to 5 is the most critical time of brain development. But I feel like if we stop there, people think, oh, okay, so we push academics
Mhm.
down earlier so we don't lose that opportunity. But that's not what research is telling us about
No.
brains, right?
Right. Right.
So
And
what's play's connection?
I think there are several layers to it. I know there's the research that tells us that the brain lights up in play, right? So first and foremost, just that it lights up, it's making connections, it's secreting chemicals and neurotransmitters are firing. All these things are going on that actually enhance brain growth.
Uh-huh.
Dr. Stuart Brown, one of my favorite quotes that he gives is that it's like literally, it's like fertilizer for the brain. The same way we put chemicals on plants, the brain is bringing chemicals in to help the brain to grow.
Yeah.
And so what he puts out there is that it would be crazy for us not to use it. Why are we even having this conversation? Is
Hmm.
kind of his
Yeah.
perspective there. So there's that aspect of it that it's firing and lighting up. The other thing that I've read about, and I would never claim that I know all of the neuroscience, but the bits that I've
Same.
read that are fascinating to me,
Yeah.
there are those pieces about how the brain responds. But I also love how play is woven into relationships. That when you get down on the floor and you play with a young child, there are all those things about play with, the questioning and the brain's lighting up and they're thinking and they're problem solving. They're doing all of these things and we're having conversation. So you've got language hooks, all these exciting things happening. But I love this piece of research that shows that our brains actually start to sync up with the,
Hmm.
the young children. And so we're literally scaffolding their brain with our brain, and that it actually lights up in places like the prefrontal cortex, which is really important for one. So we want to be supporting that development, but also that they see this in younger children where they generally don't look for tons of action going on in the prefrontal cortex. But when they're connected in that relational back and forth of play, that it lights up. And so to me, I just can't help but think how powerful it is for us to support that brain growth. For a child who doesn't
Hmm.
get the interactions, the play, the connections, there are just different things happening in that brain
Hmm.
than a child who's allowed to play, who has conversations, who's connected in relationship. It's just the way the brain is wired to learn.
Hmm.
And it's nice to say that and sounds poetic, but we literally have the studies that
Right.
show with actual scanners and things, right? That it's actually
Yeah.
changing the brain.
Yeah, you wrote or you quoted this might be Stuart Brown. Nope, maybe Jody Willis. Anyway, I'll find out and I'll put it in the show notes. But you wrote neuroimaging research reveals the disturbances in the brain's learning circuits and neurotransmitters that accompany stressful learning environments. Joy and enthusiasm are absolutely essential for learning to happen, literally, scientifically, as a matter of fact, and research.
Yes, that's Dr. Judy Willis. And
Yeah.
I love that quote
Yeah.
because it's both sides of it, right? That the
Hmm.
absence of play, I think it's Dr. Stuart Brown says that the absence of play is not work, it's depression.
Depression.
And
Yeah.
it's not just, I think there's that mental emotional wellness piece for us as humans, but it's also about the brain. It's literally depressed,
Hmm.
like meaning it's not functioning at its highest capacity when we strip away all that, when we're overly stressed. And we've all experienced that
Yeah.
when you're so overwhelmed that you're just like, I can't process anything anymore. I don't understand the words coming out of your mouth anymore. We've all been in that overwhelmed
Yes.
state. And it's the same for young children. And we have to remember also that it's not just, is my classroom too stressful for them to process and for their brain to function properly, but also remembering that they may already come to me
Yeah.
in this hyper stress state by
Yeah.
the time they got to my room. So we need to know that about brains. And then I just love the second half of her quote because I love those qualifiers literally, scientifically, as a matter of fact and research. So
Right.
not because it's
She
cute,
dares
not
you to
because it feels
argue.
good, right? But it's just literally because the science tells us it is. It's
Uh-huh.
critical for us to have joy and playful approaches.
Yeah. Um, I think too, and you touch on this, that so many of our traditional approaches to early childhood education really expect a lot of sitting still. And
Mm-hmm.
we really kind of present as if we think if we say it or show it, they're learning it. And
Right.
that's I think where a lot of the neuroscience kind of debunks the way we've always done it. Because in play, I don't know, I think even if a child is sitting still, if they're really engaged in play, there's some movement happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we expect so much sedentary behavior that looking for where we can expand the amounts of time that children get to play is going to be of benefit there too.
Absolutely. I was just in another group that we were talking, and I said I don't remember who taught it to me, but I remember somebody saying that if your expectations and your objectives can be fulfilled by a rock, then those are not good expectations and objectives for young children, right? So if
Oh,
your expectation is that they sit still and are silent,
uh-huh.
then that's for a rock and not for a child, right?
Yeah.
Then we know that they learn by moving and engaging and that it needs to be social and meaningful and tied by relationships and experience.
Hmm.
And so you're so right that we have to shift that model that I think especially when it comes to like policymakers or parents that sometimes our earliest maybe not earliest but our easiest memory of learning we think back to college experiences or high school experiences and forget that that may work in your teens and 20s, but that's not how we design it for young children.
Right. I read an article, it was in Young Children, but it was in the early 90s, so a long time ago. But I remember reading, I think the authors are Eskridge and Jacobs, but their whole thing was that they had done a, small scale study and found that even teachers who had really good training in developmentally appropriate practice, when they actually get into a classroom or into their setting, they revert to their elementary school memories. And
Mm.
it's just because our brains are looking for safety and comfort and familiarity,
Hmm.
and it really requires an intentionality to do it
Absolutely.
differently. That's another reason I think this is such a great tool because it's a very clearly presenting. There's a whole different way to think about this, but it does require thinking.
Right. Yeah. You have to think deeply about it and then you can bring that
Yeah,
intentionality.
yeah. Um, uh, so the other thing or the next thing I guess is a quote that you have here, something you wrote. True academic rigor isn't about
Mhm.
stripping away joy, agency, and exploration. It's about embracing them as the foundation of deep learning. Rigor is another word that sets my teeth on edge in early
Same.
childhood. I mean, really any context nowadays, but in early childhood, because it comes with just what you say, like that connotation that it has to be joyless and everybody has to be
Hmm.
serious and it always has to seem controlled. And that's how we know it's a serious learning environment. And you're saying
Right.
maybe not.
Maybe not. And what I like to point out is that there's much like play, there are a lot of definitions for rigor.
Yeah.
And when you look it up and you look through all these different definitions and usages, I argue that a lot of the ways that we use it in the school system is more aligned with rigor mortis, which I don't think is what we want for
No.
our young children. but but that actual rigor in an academic sense means deep. It's deep learning. And so for
Yeah.
that type of rigor, I'm 100% on board. That if we first agree that rigor means meaningful deep learning, then I want to afford rigor for our
Uh-huh.
youngest learners, and that means that they get deep into it, that they get to experience it, that it's hands-on, it's active, it's joyful, and it's meaningful, and
Mhm.
that they have agency. That's what makes the learning deeper. And so it's another one of those terms that we first have to decide, what does this word actually mean? Because you're right. We so often say, oh yeah, rigor. That means sitting still, sitting in desks, flashcards, worksheets. That's
Mhm.
what rigor looks like.
Right.
And if rigor actually means depth, then that's the least optimal way to get to that.
Yeah, and I think I often hear rigor coupled with the phrase high expectations, as if we're not doing those things, we're really insulting the children by having a low expectation for them. But it's just a different, it's coming from development, right? It's
Mhm.
coming from an understanding of the different needs and priorities and ways of learning of children this age, these young
Absolutely.
children. Yeah. Um, uh, so this is towards the end of the book you wrote. Um, Due to the varied pressures of today, all kids are now at risk of poor practice in our early education settings. There are too many adults with the best of intentions but terrible information who are unfortunately pushing pressures down and pushing play out. Defend that.
So one of the things, so I first have to back up to Dr. Dale Farron, who's been, I keep saying she's like my fairy godmother. I just am so impressed with this lifelong body of work that she's done and how generous she's been. And I know you have as well to
Forward is
when you
amazing.
approach
She
her.
wrote the forward. Yeah.
Yeah, and when you approach her and say, "Hey, could we talk about this?" or she's just been so generous
Yeah.
and so brilliant. And one of the things that struck me is in her interviews, talking about things she's learned through some of these projects, is that one of her ahas or shifting opinions is she said, "I realized that." After decades and decades of research and working in early childhood, she said, I realized that we were creating one type of early childhood experience for our needy or underprivileged, underserved youth, and that it was totally different than what the young children from affluent families were getting.
Mhm.
And that, again, if we wanted to base it on early childhood developmental principles, they shouldn't be so different. And
Right.
I just loved her honesty and her candor in saying, why are we creating different systems for children coming from different places?
Yeah.
And so it got me thinking as well. And what I was writing about in that section that you read was the fact that, first of all, if we just start with that bias that we think that children who are behind, then maybe play we can't take that
Mhm.
risk, right?
Right. Right. We've
That
already
maybe
wasted
those
enough time.
right, those kids need the rigor that looks like flashcards and worksheets so that they can catch up. And so it's starting with that bias and then stepping back and saying, well, the conversations right now is that everyone is behind because of the pandemic and the lockdown and all of these things that, well, now everyone's behind. So
Mhm.
if we make different if we allow different programs for children who are behind, we're now saying, well, all of the children need to catch up. So now all of the children, nobody has time for play. We all need to catch up. It's this, universal panic that doesn't serve children well. And so my argument is twofold. One is that all children need programs that are based on good, sound research and developmental principles.
Mhm.
And the second part of that is that that why would we have a separate program, first of all? But also that if we really do want our young children to catch up, quote unquote,
Yeah.
right? If we really are concerned, then what is going to serve them best are these good principles. And second of all, in that section, is that if our children are behind because of this social lockdown, they don't need more isolated activities,
Right.
right? That if
Yeah.
we think of our youngest learners who are the COVID babies, they didn't miss out on flashcards and worksheets. They missed out on social interaction, on cooperative
Right.
play, on some language, conversational turns. I mean,
Mhm.
those are the things they quote unquote missed out on or got
Mhm.
behind on. And so, one, all children deserve play because of what we know about it, how it serves them in their development. And two, if children are behind today, then they're behind on the things that play serves best.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so I mean, it's an equity issue,
Right.
too. It's not just play because it's cute or fun. It's just
Mhm.
really what we know children need and deserve to thrive and to become uh whatever it is they're going to become, whatever the best, strongest version
Mhm.
of that life. It's so important. And so I'm planning to use this in a class. I'm gonna get back in here. Class I'm teaching in the fall. So
I love
so
it.
I'm very excited about it. And I just want to thank you again for it. We so often when I talk about play, people will say, well, I can't do that because my program demands that our curriculum is evidence-based. It's like,
Right.
there's evidence, right? Like there's
Exactly.
evidence. It may not
Yeah,
be in a package that's mailed to you every month, but there's evidence that this is
exactly.
effective and impactful and developmentally sound.
Mhm.
There's really a lot. So was there anything you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask or we didn't get to?
I
Anything
think
else?
you hit on some of the really important
Yeah,
parts. I love it.
yeah,
I just really appreciate you reading it so deeply. Was telling somebody recently that I would love for, this to get in people's hands and to be read, but more
yeah,
than like a book count, for me, it means so much to me to hear from you and others that I know who I know have read it and thought so deeply about it, and to hear them say that they appreciate it, that means so much
yeah,
to me. So
yeah.
thank you for
You're,
sharing it.
Thank you for writing it. We'll put in the show notes a link for people to order it, and where to
Wonderful.
find your website and the podcast and all of that. So
Fantastic.
if probably a lot of listeners already know who you are and how to find you, but just in case there's someone new, we'll get them pointed in your direction.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, all right. Well, thank you, Amanda, and thank you everybody for listening to another episode of That Early.